Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody enjoy their shower this morning? Yeah. The second one that you got as you left the house. It's just the earth reminding us that it's mostly water. My name is Ruth Robarge. I will be your moderator this morning. Welcome. Welcome to all here, and welcome to those joining us via live stream. We have the happy news that the sound system is in the works. New speakers. So yes, congratulations to all the people who spearheaded that. Running through the old soundboard. So it's better, but it's not as good as it's going to be. So more on that as they get their work done back there. We appreciate that. We do want to take a moment to, one of the joys of being moderator is welcoming guests. If you are a visitor, or if you brought a guest with you, if you would stand as you are so willing to do so and introduce yourself. Any guests this morning?
I have a friend from my college years, KU, who lives in Stanford, Connecticut. Kat Brown.
Hey, Kat. Morning. Morning. Yes, sir.
John Matt Greco, this is my mom, Annie Gilmore, and we're related to Rebecca.
Welcome, very welcome.
Ruth, I would like to introduce Stephen Brown, who is from Integrity Systems, and he's with us this morning, and you stole my thunder a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to ask you how you think things sound. We're in the middle of the installation, and we're very excited. Stephen's in the back of the room. If you'd stand for me, Stephen, and we'd like to welcome you, and thank you for all your hard work.
I can hear you much better. No, I mean, up here, we kind of had a cross where we couldn't hear very well. So welcome all, one and all. Thank you for coming today. I want to break from our tradition and do a quick announcement. Book sale. Half price today. Runs into 4. So while there is not a Sunday Plus lunch, there is food for the brain to be had in Conover, which is just down the hall, right? So pick up your books. I've had people tell me that they not so much buy books as they rent them for the year and then they turn them back in. So replenish your supply for the year. Appreciate that. And that's my checklist. Oh, do remember to silence your cell phones. So that we don't have that going off during the church. While you're silencing the cell phones, maybe you could also silence those other voices in your head so that y'all do have other voices. I have other voices in my head. So silence those two if you can so that you can be present. We appreciate you coming and thank you all.
good to have them back. Yes. You might remember Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Emperor's New Clothes. In case you don't remember, or just to refresh your memory, in this story, some unscrupulous weavers created some cloth that they said was so fine that only the wisest among them would ever be able to see it. And so the emperor walked around with this fine cloth on and nothing else. The story ends, well, before the story ends, the people surrounding him are too afraid to speak up. They don't want to be thought to be unwise. But as the story ends, a child who cares more for truth than for reputation shouts, "The emperor has no clothes." Children in our world generally don't have much power. However, they're pretty good at seeing through justifications and hypocrisy. And they're not that worried about being seen as wise because they're children. This weekend, we saw some really dramatic evidence of children's courage and ability to see through. On Friday, an estimated 4 million people gathered in 6,100 actions across 185 countries for a global climate strike. Maybe you were there. Your staff here at All Souls participated in the strike. This effort has been led all the way by young people who see through our adult complacency and our paralysis, who see that it's not that we lack the ability to address the causes of global warming and catastrophic climate change, but that we lack the will. And like the young activists after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting, these young people are calling BS. The most famous is Swedish activist 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, who began a little over a year ago to protest outside the Swedish parliament. She was attempting to force them to take action to address the climate crisis. Another young activist is Varshini Prakash, a young adult who co-founded Sunrise, an environmental movement that is currently advocating for the Green New Deal. Isra Hirsi, a 16-year-old daughter of U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, helped co-found the U.S. Youth Climate Strike. Jamie Margolin is a 17-year-old who is one of the leaders of the climate action movement called 0 Hour. These young people I've named are being joined by 21 other young people who are the plaintiffs in a lawsuit called Juliana versus the United States. This suit claims that the federal government has not protected Americans from climate change. The youngest among those plaintiffs is an 11-year-old, a Unitarian Universalist named Levi Draham. The kids are all right. A climate action movement in the United Kingdom called Extinction Rebellion ends its declaration of rebellion with these words: "We refuse to bequeath a dying planet to future generations by failing to act now. We act in peace, with ferocious love of these lands in our hearts. We act on behalf of life." As we gather this morning to consider what it is that makes our lives, your heart may be heavy. Maybe it's heavy with grief for our planet, or maybe it's full of hope in response to this weekend's events. Or maybe your heart is heavy or light for reasons all your own. Whatever the condition of your heart, you are welcome here, and we are glad you're here. We will begin our worship by kindling the flame of our chalice. This simple ritual act connects us through time with all our ancestors in our faith and all those who will follow us. And it connects us through space with the people around the globe who are gathering for worship this morning.
Hello, my name is Tori, and I light this chalice for the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part of.
And now if you will please rise as you are able, and we will share together our covenant. Together we affirm goodwill in the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And if you'll remain standing, we'll sing together For the Earth Forever Turning. I'd like to invite any of the young people in the room or anybody who's young at heart who wants to come forward. I've got a cool activity for us to try. All right. So how many of you probably heard Tori say the words, interdependent web of existence. Have you heard that before? Anybody? Anybody? Okay, good. Some of us have heard that before. Does anybody know what that means? You want to talk about it, Tori? What's it mean? How we're all connected, yeah. So what's included in this web besides people? Animals, plants, yeah. So the sea, yes. So why don't you think in your mind about some part of that web that you want to represent today, okay? Maybe it's a tiger, or a tree, or a person, or the air. Can you think of something? Okay. A lion, okay. We got some ideas. Tiger, lion. So it's the idea that we're all connected. This thing I have in my hand is called an energy stick, and it has a little battery inside, but just like a dolphin, okay. But just like energy has to have a way, the energy has to have a way to go out and a way to come back in. So this stick doesn't, the battery doesn't work unless you are connecting this side and this side. Cool, huh? Yeah, you're going to. So the way we're going to try, we're going to make an example of this interdependent web by, if you can stand up. You want to have your hands empty. So I'm going to hold hands over here with you, if that's okay. And then you hold hands with everybody around you. So we're going to make a web here, and we're going to be all connected. Okay. Let's make a circle. Here we go. Circle up. Okay. If we connect this, I hope this stick is going to light up and make that noise again. So you want to touch the silver part? Okay, we can let go now. Okay, everybody can sit back down. Thank you. That's pretty cool, isn't it? You want to pass it down? You can just, we'll start here. You can try it with just one person. So the idea is that we're all connected, and once we're all connected, that energy works. It passes around. It moves through us. What would happen if we broke, if somebody didn't hold hands? It wouldn't work. It would break the circuit. What if we left out our dolphin or our lion or our tiger and didn't include them in the circle? They wouldn't get that energy, would they? It's pretty cool. I played with it a lot at home before I got here. So what's important about this is that we have to make a big circle, and we have to work together and hold on to each other and not leave anybody out. Cool. All right, I'll take it back. If anybody wants to play after the service, I'll have it. So our circle needs to be what? We need to keep it connected, right? We need to not leave anybody out. So as we work to take care of our earth, I hope you can remember, don't leave anybody out, work together, and stay connected. Those are our lessons for today. Thank you. So we will now sing you onto your classes. We'll see you later.
Good morning. I am Jane Wilson, former member of the Board of Trustees, former president of the Board of Trustees, former co-chair of the Renovation Steering Committee, formerly many, many things in this church, but the one thing I have remained doing the whole time I've been a member is singing with this choir. Today's offering benefits both our music and our religious education program, both critically important to All Souls. The music program is so much more than pretty music on Sunday morning. And from the perspective of a choir member, I'd like to tell you why. Through the music program, we build community. This choir is a tight-knit community unto itself. But when we wrap our music around you, we all become one community. Thanks to the music program, we are inspired intellectually and spiritually. We hear music and learn of traditions that we may be totally unfamiliar with. I personally have learned what a hemiola is. And music transports us in ways that sometimes words alone cannot. And finally, through our music program, we work toward achieving social justice in our larger community. Where else have you heard cantatas about suffering through breast cancer, or a young man's struggle with gender identity, or the immigrant experience? The All Souls Choir has sung about all of those things. And our Monday concerts after our May Music Sunday has raised money for these causes and much, much more. If all of this sounds vaguely familiar, build, inspire, create, that's because that is the mission of this church. Both music and our RE are programs that supply energy and dedication to our mission. Please give this morning with a joyful heart as you hear our choir perform much, much better than it would without our paid professional section leaders. Thank you so much. Make your checks out to All Souls and put music and RE on the memo line.
Please join me now as we dedicate our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation. We respectful, caring community to inspire personal and spiritual growth and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
I am 15 years old and I'm from Sweden. I speak on behalf of Climate Justice Now. Many people say that Sweden is just a small country and it doesn't matter what we do. But I've learned that you are never too small to make a difference. And if a few children can get headlines all over the world just by not going to school, then imagine what we could all do together if we really wanted to. But to do that, we have to speak clearly, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. You only speak of green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular. You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. But I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. Our biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people in countries like mine can live in luxury. It is the sufferings of the many which pay for the luxuries of the few. The year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything while there still was time to act. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future in front of their very eyes. Until you start focusing on what needs to be done rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. We need to keep the fossil fuels in the ground, and we need to focus on equity. And if solutions within this system are so impossible to find, then maybe we should change the system itself. We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. You have ignored us in the past, and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses, and we are running out of time. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not. The real power belongs to the people.
The cathedral is burning. Absent flame or smoke, stained glass explodes in silence. Fractal scales of angel, damsel, rainbow parrot. Charred beams of blackened coral lie in heaps on the sacred floor. White stones fallen from high places. Spires collapsed, crushing sainted turtle and gargoyle octopus. Something there is in my kind that cannot love. A wreath, a tundra, a plain stone breast of desert, ever quite enough. A tree, perhaps, once recomposed as splendid furniture. A forest, after the whole of it is planed to posts and beams and raised to a heaven of earnest construction in the name of Our Lady. All Paris stood on the bridges to watch her burning, believing a thing this old, this large and beautiful must be holy and cannot be lost. And coral temples older than Charlemagne suffocate, unattended, bleach and bleed from the eye, the centered heart. Lord of leaves and fishes, lead me across this great divide. Teach me how to love the sacred places, not as one devotes to one who made me in his image and is bound to love me back. I mean, as a body loves its microbial skin, the worm its nape of loam, all secret otherness forgiven. Love beyond anything I will ever make of it.
I am worn, I am tired, in my quiet sorrow. Hopelessness will not let me be. Help me. I won't speak of this ache inside light eludes me. In the silence of my heart I'm praying. I keep on day by day, trusting light will guide me. Who will be with me through this time, holding me? Where's my hope when I fear? Holding on, believing. Deep inside, I pray I'm strong. Help me.
What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, they can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone, you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But two people fighting, back to back, can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more.
I come to you today with my heart alternating between hope and grief. This week I was in Boulder, Colorado to visit my daughter who lives there. And on Friday we attended a rally at the University of Colorado campus. It was part of that worldwide climate strike that maybe you saw about and that I mentioned earlier. Gathered there, I saw elementary-aged school kids gathered with their signs that describe a future that children should not have to contemplate. The college-age leaders reminded us to stay on the grass and follow the rules of the university, but then they outlined their movement's demands: adoption of the Green New Deal, total emissions reductions, respect and reparation for indigenous lands and people, among others. There were older people there too, besides us, including a well-known community activist in his 60s who the youth had invited to speak. He had been successful in the past, making change. He told how he is now working to convince the city commission to allow people to sign petitions electronically so that more can participate in direct democracy in their city. As I listened to the speakers, I felt myself acutely as at one of those Gen X moments where we're in the middle. We're always in the middle. This tension of being in between, I heard the young people describing such comprehensive change, demanding it, that it happen in a short time. And my older self had these doubts about, will this happen? And I listened to the older activist describe online petitions for the city government, and I felt impatient, like the other young people there, with such slow, incremental changes when we are facing a catastrophe. The younger people in this movement are demanding nothing short of a revolution in how we consume energy and goods in the country. They didn't share much information about how that might happen, although I know they have plans. The older activist was discussing the past, what had worked, what may continue to work, though it doesn't promise a huge change all at once. This tension between generations, between incremental change and revolution is real. It hangs over this movement and it hangs over us in this moment. Longtime political activists are wondering how to pass a revolutionary agenda in a democracy where things move slowly. But the science is telling us that nothing less than revolution will be the way we avoid catastrophe. If you're looking for ways to deal with it yourself, you can Google. Google is full of articles with titles like, "The Top 10 Things You Can Do to Address the Climate Crisis." Generally, however, these lists include things like fly less, drive less, eat less meat, turn off the lights when we're not using them. It seems disproportionate to what's happening. Although these actions are helpful, we know they're not revolutionary on their own. In a recent article in Time magazine, I don't know if you saw this, recent issue was dedicated all to the climate. Michael Mann wrote an article about these kinds of lists and how that they're worse than misleading. He wrote, "There's a long history of industry-funded deflection campaigns aimed to divert attention from big polluters and place the burden on individuals. Individual action is important and something we should all champion, but appearing to force Americans to give up meat or travel or other things central to the lifestyle they've chosen to live is politically dangerous. It plays right into the hands of climate change deniers whose strategy tends to be to portray climate champions as freedom-hating totalitarians. The bigger issue is that focusing on individual choices around air travel and beef consumption heightens the risk of losing sight of the gorilla in the room, which is civilization's reliance on fossil fuels. We need systemic changes that will reduce everyone's carbon footprint, whether or not they care. I agree with Mann that the gorilla is our reliance on fossil fuels. This problem will require a massive retooling of how we move people and goods. But I also think that our tiny individual actions are important. But we don't have to choose either one or the other. In fact, I think it's dangerous if we choose either one or the other. If we believe that only big systemic change is what's going to make a difference, how am I going to help that? We throw up our hands. It feels just too big. But if we do that, if we throw up our hands, we lose the opportunity to live in concert with our values, to do things just because it's the right thing to do. On the other hand, if we fall for those campaigns that put all of the burden on individuals, we might bike to work and adjust our thermostats and recycle, and then believe we've done enough. We lose our opportunity to affect the system. If we want to help avert the coming crisis, we must choose both to change our personal behavior and to change the system. Taking individual responsibility to change the things within our own sphere of control while fighting for system change is possible. Rebecca Solnit writes, "Working for climate justice is entirely compatible with grief and horror. You can work to elect climate heroes while being sad." Our choice to take action can be framed as a response to the seventh principle that I mentioned with the children earlier. Our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. Choosing to act for our Earth is a choice to act for all of life. We are part of the web, along with the water that serves as the Earth's circulation, the plants and the animals that keep Earth's skin healthy, and the air that she and we breathe. What affects one part affects us all. Our choice can also be framed as a response to the first principle of Unitarian Universalism, which is the inherent worth and dignity of all people. In the New York Times, Jamie Margolin, who's a 17-year-old leader in the climate action movement, her movement's called 0 Hour, she wrote and framed the fight for the planet this way: "Why do I do this? I am striking for a decolonized future. A decolonized world is one in which the wealthiest nations and industries do not continue to exploit communities in the global south, and instead support them in dealing with the effects of the climate crisis, like droughts, hurricanes, and floods. A decolonized world is one in which those most affected by the climate crisis, poor and indigenous communities and those in the global south, are heard and have a seat at the table where the decisions are made." She continues, "I am fighting for a decolonized future because a decolonized world is the only one that will be able to turn the tide of climate crisis. Many people pin the start of the climate crisis to the Industrial Revolution, but it actually started long before that. Colonization started the climate crisis. With colonization, European settlers destroyed natural habitats, hunted species to death, and brought in invasive plants that enslaved indigenous and African people were forced to grow. With colonization came the idea that everything on this earth is made for our extraction, and that everything is to be bought and sold, stolen, and abused. With colonialism came the idea that nothing, not air, water, trees, or animals, was sacred or priceless. And this historical mindset is how we got to the climate disaster. Before the first coal was mined, before the first factories opened, the seeds for the climate crisis had been planted." Is that Earth calling? I don't know. Sorry. There she is again. Oh. We've all been there, Jane, don't worry. This climate crisis is not limited to its effects on animals, soil, and land. As Jamie writes so wisely, it disproportionately affects people in the global south, people who live on the coasts of our land masses, and those who live on the margins in terms of their identity and their financial privilege. If we, who live in the center of the country, who are relatively privileged, and therefore not yet affected by the climate crisis, are not moved to act, we are harming others by our inaction. This swath of humanity, the beauty of the earth, justice for all people, all of this is worth fighting for. So how do we do it? How do we energize ourselves? How do we go beyond just simply worrying about climate crisis? How can we be more effective? I believe that one answer lies in the messages that we choose to focus on. The predictions of rising sea levels and melting ice caps and more frequent and stronger storms and wildfires and drought, all of that is frightening and it's overwhelming. For most people, when frightened and overwhelmed, we'll shut down. Sharing these stories of what is predicted is important, but I believe that it alone is not effective in helping motivate people to take action. We feel helpless or like we just can't face it. But beyond the effects it has on people's capacity, preaching only the apocalypse is, I believe, a betrayal of our love for this earth and its creatures. Hosea Ballou, a Universalist minister and theologian in the 19th century, wrote something similar about the practice of scaring people with hellfire and damnation in order to make them show their love of God and virtue. He wrote, "The preaching of future rewards and punishment for the purpose of inducing people to love God and moral virtue is not only useless, but pernicious. All such preaching, be it ever so well-intentioned, not only amounts to a declaration that God and moral virtue are in themselves unlovely and unworthy of being loved, but as far as it is believed, serves to alienate the affections from those most precious objects." To paraphrase Ballou, our earth is lovely and worthy of being loved. And similarly, our actions will be better motivated by those feelings of love rather than feelings of fear and despair. Czech dissident, writer and statesman Václav Havel said, "Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something is worth doing no matter how it turns out." We can't know for sure if our actions will bring about enough change to save us from the worst of the climate collapse. No scientist on Earth has lived through anything like this, and we must rely on the best computer modeling we have. But I am certain that taking action is worth doing, whether it works or not. Failing to act is not an option. From this place of love and action will come our hope. Hope will be the fuel for further action, and this virtuous cycle is what can save us. There are practices we can adopt in this time to increase our ability to address the crisis and to be in alignment with our values. They're practices as recipes for hope and antidotes to despair. The most important, I believe, is gratitude. By engaging in gratitude, we remind ourselves what is important, what is beautiful, what strength looks like, what tenderness feels like, what forgiveness sounds like. We remind ourselves what we're fighting for. Another antidote to despair is to gather with people who share our hopes for a better future, and you're already here. But when we gather, we can give one another strength to find our part in the struggle, and we can remind ourselves that individually we do not have to do everything, and actually we cannot do everything. We need each other. A third recipe for hope is to change our stories. We can tell new stories, stories that reject the either or of either systemic change or individual actions. We can tell stories about how the adults who failed to avert climate crisis listened to the youth who called BS and finally took action. We can stop getting sucked into those fake fights about whether it's better to adjust your thermostat or to stop eating meat, paper, or plastic. We can focus on the beauty of what we're trying to save instead of just contributing to crisis fatigue. The most effective antidote to despair, however, is action. And the best way to do that is to join a movement. Movements can hold all of these qualities: gratitude, gathering, stories, and action. Don't worry if you, like me, are no longer classified as a youth. The youth movements for climate change welcome older adult participation as well. Now, they're not going to be so welcoming if you come in to teach them what to do. But if you can join with a willingness to do what's asked, you are welcome. You can use Google to find these movements, or Facebook. Some of them are Sunrise Movement, Extinction Rebellion, 350 KC, Sierra Club, and the Citizens Climate Lobby. One other thing is that climate justice does not exist in a vacuum. As Adrienne Marie Brown writes, everything is connected. The soil needs rain, organic matter, air, worms, and life in order to do what it needs to do to give and receive life. Each element is an essential component. Organizing takes humility and selflessness and patience and rhythm, while our ultimate goal of liberation will take many expert components. Some of us build and fight for land, healthy bodies, healthy relationships, clean air, water, homes, safety, dignity, and humanizing education. Others of us fight for food and political prisoners and abolition and environmental justice. Our work is intersectional and multifaceted. Nature teaches us that our work has to be nuanced and steadfast, and more than anything, we need each other in order to get free. The entanglement of all those systems of domination and all of our work for justice means that working for more squared for racial and economic equity is climate work. So is working for housing with KC tenants. So is working to get people registered to vote. If you've ever wondered when would be the right time to get involved or to get more involved, then I'll tell you, now. Our beautiful earth is worth our attention. Join the climate movement or step up your own involvement. We know these movements are messy. It's not a straight line to success. But our house is on fire, and we don't have time to quibble about how to put it out. Perhaps poet Adrienne Rich said it best. She wrote, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." May it be so. Amen. Will you please rise as you're comfortable, and we'll sing together one more step.
Take one more
We extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not the light of science, the warmth of collective movement, and the blazing fire of commitment for those we keep in our hearts until we are together again. I'll share these closing words from Reverend Ashley Horan. She wrote, "My 4-year-old daughter has taught me this lesson. When a child wants to derail business as usual, to curb the hubris of adults who dare believe in schedules and plans and productivity, one fierce little body and one clear, piercing voice, strategically applied to the right pressure point, will change the course of the day's events." My comrades in organizing have taught me this lesson. When a silenced people want to be heard, to raise from dry bones a living, breathing dream of new ways of moving, being, incarnating freedom, one small, tenacious group whose hearts beat in rhythm, rising shoulder to shoulder, will bend the arc from impossibility to hope. Our young climate leaders are teaching us this lesson. When the grown-ups and the old movements are too slow, as the sea levels rise and the hurricanes rage and the migrants flee and the corporations profit, one generation, both silenced and young, refusing to accept an inheritance of doom, will take us toward the streets and move us toward life. Blessings upon them as they teach us, organize us, beckon us in, and call us out. May their fierce urgency and uncompromising clarity show us the path toward healing and freedom and hope. Amen.